Hi, I'm Mike Bush.
I'm Paul New.
And I'm Colleen Sterling. Welcome to Ask the A&Ps from AOPA.
On Ask the A&Ps, we try to take your toughest maintenance questions and do our best to come up with answers for them. So if you have a question, please email us at podcasts@aopa.org, and we'll get you on the schedule and so you can participate on the program. That's podcasts@aopa.org.
And if you like the show, make sure and follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you'd like to get on our email list for our monthly newsletter and other good stuff, the easiest way to do that is to text the word SAVVY, SAVVY, to 33777. And a little text bot will ask you for your name and your email address and put you on the list. That's text the word SAVVY, SAVVY, to 33777 to put yourself on the list.
Our first question is from Chad, who is feeling the chill. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking for a little cold weather guidance. I fly a 2007 Cirrus SR22. It's naturally aspirated with a Continental IO 550N. I want to fly that airplane all year round, regardless of the weather, really. So, but I've had a mechanic tell me that sub-zero temps for a piston airplane is not recommended. Done some online research that, it seems like there's some flying clubs and stuff out there that will limit the use of their planes in the winter.
Wow.
Looked into in the POH, it says that flights below 23 degrees negative Celsius, you need cowl inlet covers, but it doesn't say you can't fly it in those temps. So I guess the first part of the question is there a temperature that's too cold for a piston airplane?
Yeah, but your mechanic would not last very long in
Alaska.
Alaska.
I was going to say, don't ask your mechanic, ask an Alaskan bush pilot.
That's
Right.
I mean, as long as you
there is absolutely no problem flying in cold air. The only problem is starting in cold air.
Okay.
And it's
cold oil.
It's very important to preheat the engine anytime you're starting in sub-freezing temperatures.
So
But
I do. I was just going to say I do have a Canis heater, but
once the engine is running, it's it's a non-issue. The engine is generating its own heat.
Okay.
Yeah. So Adrian, I think Adrian just flew his Bonanza
over
the pole,
over the North Pole. Yeah,
over the North Pole, and I think what did he say his oil temperature is maximum oil temperature is 110 degrees or something.
Yeah.
I don't think we're supposed to talk about it because I don't think he wanted anybody to know, but it was like really cold.
So let's talk about that. You if you're flying in very frigid air, you're going to probably have pretty low oil temperatures and pretty low cylinder head temperatures.
Right.
The only bad thing about low oil temperatures is that it doesn't get a chance to boil off the moisture that's in the oil. But if you're flying in the frigid temperatures like that, there isn't going to be any moisture in the air to begin with. So you probably don't have to worry too much about that. Low cylinder head temperatures, really the only thing about low cylinder head temperatures is if they get so low that you have lead scavenging problems, and so all you need to do is keep an eye out on your spark plugs every time you pull them every 100 hours to clean them and gap them and rotate them, and see if there's any abnormal amount of lead buildup on the spark plugs. If there's not, then don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, so the second part of my question was that when I do fly it in cold temperatures, I'm getting oil temps of like 114 degrees, which is just barely into the green on the Cirrus. And so, and then super cold cylinder head temperatures flying lean of peak. So should I fly rich of peak, which will raise those temps, or should I be slapped for even thinking that?
Well, I don't really understand why there's a a bottom of the green on oil temperature. To be honest with you,
Okay.
if you're flying in cold weather, you're going to be using a multi-vis oil, obviously, and the multi-vis oil is very pourable even at very cold temperatures.
It's designed for that.
So it maybe that red line was set back in the days when multi-vis oil was not being used or something like that. But I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Really the only big issue is moisture buildup.
And then
And that's not terrible because you're going to be flying all the time.
right. And when you were talking about the lead buildup in the cylinder, is that something that, well, then when I'm flying in the summer and the hot temperatures and it's getting hot, would be kind of counterbalancing that, or is that not really the case?
Typically once lead deposits form in the combustion chamber, they pretty much stay there.
Unless you get detonation, you can clean them up.
Yeah, you can put the cylinder in a light detonation, or Lycoming has some weird procedure with walnut shells or something to blast off
Just live with it.
lead deposits. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. But again,
it's not a problem in the cylinder.
It's a good idea to keep an eye on it. Hopefully, every time you have the spark plugs out, you stick a bore scope in, look around. If you're not seeing abnormally heavy lead deposits, then it's not something to worry about.
Mostly a problem with your valves. If you do get deposits on the valve seats, then they'll not seal very well, but you can clean that part. Don't worry about cleaning the piston face or cleaning the cylinder or anything like
you
that.
could consider possibly adding TCP to your fuel if you're doing a lot of the cold weather operations for additional lead scavenging.
Okay.
So your mechanic was very interesting to me. He said sub-zero. Did he specify Fahrenheit
which
or
zero?
Centigrade or
that
Kelvin?
23 is pretty low.
But I figured out why he said this. I know you guys think I'm nuts. He's afraid that you're going to get out in sub-zero temperatures and something go wrong, call him to come out and work on your airplane. This has nothing to do with whether the airplane is flyable, because clearly in the POH, cold temperatures are fine. This is all about your mechanic. And you know what? The more I think about it, I like your mechanic. I think that's a great answer. He's spot on.
Yeah, I thought that was not. I'm like, man, that sounds off. So figured to ask the experts.
Yeah,
so
read some books about Alaska bush flying. You'll get a sense for what you have to do with a cold airplane.
So, Paul, you think what the mechanic really meant was it's a bad idea to fly an airplane in sub-zero temperatures if you want me to work on it.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I watch, sometimes you see the reality shows with the Alaskan airline guys and all that. There's no such thing as summer up there. On a hot day, they're still wearing coats. And I watch them out there, they have to encapsulate the airplane in a parka every night just so that the oil won't totally freeze. And I'm thinking, I would never survive up there. To me, that's just off limits.
Yeah, I knew a bush pilot up there that a long time ago who he flew a Super Cub, and his routine was, at the end of the day of flying in the winter, he would drain the oil into a bucket, bring it inside.
Oh, inside.
Sit it on his Franklin stove, and then in the morning he would pour it back into the engine.
Oh gosh.
Sounds like a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. That's just not right.
But it's a novel approach to preheating.
Yeah. Those guys, man, they deserve an awful lot. That's
resourceful.
That's fortitude. That's what that is. Those people are strong.
But man, he had stick and rudder skills to die for. He would land that thing on gravel bars, all sorts of weird places, and he really knew that airplane.
I love watching some of those videos, the places those people land. But sorry, off topic.
But I digress.
I digress.
What was the topic?
Yeah, what was it?
Chad's flying a Cirrus down in the lower 40s. So
down in the lower 40s. You get the engine started, you're good to go. And
Is
Yeah.
there
boy,
is
do they
there a winter?
perform great.
Is there a winterization kit for a Cirrus? I wonder, Paul. You
Yeah,
should
they
know
got
that.
plates.
Blocking the
There's
cooler.
plates that go in the front.
Ah,
I've never
Do you-
seen any. And all the single engine Cessnas have the winterization plates as well.
Yeah.
And you'll see the nut plates in the cowling for mounting.
yeah. I mean,
those.
considering the fact that the Cirrus is built in Duluth, you'd think
Yeah,
that they
right,
have that pretty well
exactly.
figured out.
Yeah.
For,
I
for
mean-
a mechanic to say it's not a good idea to fly a Cirrus in cold weather, he sort of forgets where it came from.
Where it came from. And they leave out
Maybe
of
the
Duluth
plastic gets
every
brittle
day.
or something like that.
He also told me not to fly at Lena Peak, so I don't
Oh,
really
time
believe
for
him
me.
anymore anyway.
New
No,
mechanic.
you're going to
Yeah.
have to get a different mechanic, or
Yeah,
just
no.
don't tell him what you do.
Well, don't
Yeah.
ask mechanic CFI stuff, and don't ask your CFI mechanic stuff, and you.
Yeah.
Do you think I've never seen a Cirrus with the inlet covers on it either.
Never heard of that.
I mean, if I'm getting to 114 degrees oil temp and everything's running and working just fine, is that something that's even necessary or something I should look into?
It's not necessary, but it's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah,
mean,
I would check it out.
probably-
Okay.
I mean, if they sell it, I guess
Of,
that's
of course, if it's a Cirrus part, it's going to cost twice as much as you think it's
Right.
going to
Yeah.
cost. But
And when you get them, send me a picture. I'd like to know what they look like.
yeah,
it gets that cold in Tennessee, Paul.
No, I just want. I don't want any. I just
I
want to see the picture.
I thought Cirrus authorized service centers were required to keep them in stock. No.
No, not in Tennessee. We have special waivers. My Cirrus doesn't have any. I mean, matter of fact, I need to look. I don't even know that. I don't know how they would mount.
I don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see. if they
JB
look like.
Weld.
JB Weld. There you go.
It's a
Band-Aids.
plastic airplane. What do you?
From what I
talking
saw, it looked like you have to drill a screw into it.
about? Okay.
So like you got to have somebody put a screw through it to hold it in there.
Well,
Paper
at
clips.
least one. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only problem with plates is that once you have them on there and you're airborne, you can't take them off mid-flight.
Yeah.
So,
Or it's very hard.
if you're going to take off in sub-zero temperatures but land at southern Florida, just bear that in mind.
Right.
Yeah, some airplanes have louvers that are controllable from the
Yep.
cockpit. Now that's the way to
Yeah.
deal with that. But
On the Columbia, there's a service kit where you actually have a door that covers or partially covers the oil cooler, and there's an STC to move the control for that in the cabin, because Columbia, in their infinite wisdom, had the control at the left air inlet just behind the propeller, so you could open and close it on the ground, but not in flight.
Ah,
And Kelly Aerospace came out with a bulletin to actually move it into the cockpit. And that's for the oil cooler. It's just this little hinged plate. It's genius.
Hmm.
And it works fairly well.
interesting.
Yeah.
easy field approval,
Well,
right?
don't forget
Yeah.
your snowsuit
Right.
and your little gloves.
Little gloves.
Yeah.
Mittens.
Mittens.
Airplane mittens. That's what he needs.
That's right. All right, Chad, you're
Okay.
making
Yeah.
cold just talking to you. Jeez.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for
Yeah.
the call.
Thanks for the call, Chad.
Dress warmly.
Our next question is from Andy, who just might be the grandmaster of workarounds. Go ahead, Andy.
Well, thanks for the intro. So my issue is I have a 2020 LX7, a modified Lancer 4P. Great plane. It is has G3X as the PFD, MFD, has sensors for EGT, CHT on every cylinder. It has twin turbocharged, so it has turbine inlet temperature sensors. And just after my last annual, the TIT sensor started to go flaky on both turbines. So it bounces between maybe 500 degrees in a few seconds. So it's not physically possible that that's actually going on. I can key the mic and I instantly get a 200 or 200 to 300 degree drop in my TIT. So I know it's not physical. I've checked.
You
sensors.
turn on the faucet and the toilet flushes.
That's it.
Yeah, okay.
Not physical, but it's somewhat abstract. And the turbines, depending on the phase of flight, are actually quite critical. So my workaround is I know on the left side, which is one of the turbines, my maximum EGT for cylinder number 2 normally is about 20 degrees lower than the turbine inlet temperature is generally. On the right, the maximum EGT is about 30 degrees lower than the TIT is. So since I don't have reliable TIT, I've kind of defaulted for the time being to using the maximum EGT on both sides of the engine. And those are stable, always right where I need them to be. I use this information to do lean of peak, keep my TITs around 1600 in flight, CHTs around 370 degrees. So my question then is, am I asking for trouble using the EGT as primary until I can figure out what's going on with these TIT sensors?
Andy,
Yes.
why don't you just fix the problem?
How long
Why,
do you
why are
intend to
you
go like that?
overthinking it like this?
Well, I looked at
Probes are not that expensive.
And by the way, I have a suspicion that it's not the probes, because first of all, the probability of both probes failing at the same time is very tiny, and second of all, if the probes failed, then it wouldn't respond when you were keying the transmitter.
right.
So my guess is that it's a connector or something like that. It's probably not the probes. But why don't you fix the problem?
Well, I've tried. I've tested the sensors. Right, the sensors read pretty much right what they need to sense as it's outside the engine. The wires, cables, the connectors, all test good on the ground, cowling off.
Did you disconnect and reconnect?
I did several times.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What sort of connectors do your TIT probes have? Are they spade connectors or are they screw connectors?
They're screw connectors.
Okay.
And
Those
so,
are the
yeah.
They're the worst to get reliable. Once you get them working, they do really good. Did you clean the connectors? Little Scotch-Brite, little
braid the
Preeminent 22 or something? Yeah.
Yeah. And so during the next annual, my intention is just to pull them out, do whatever I need to do to resolve this issue. But my question is,
This doesn't sound like something that ought to wait till the next annual, and it doesn't sound like something that's going to require taking a lot of stuff apart.
What engine monitor do you have?
The G3.
it's the
Oh,
3X.
G3X. You said
Yep.
that. Yeah.
Well, Garmin pretty much system.
Yeah. The EIS.
So there's an A to D converter in there somewhere that
Right.
might conceivably be the problem as well.
But it's on both TITs, but nothing else in the system.
That is correct. And oddly enough, the TITs work in certain phases of flight at certain times. I mean, they give me readings that I would expect. The readings are stable. And then
This all makes it
flipping.
pretty clear that it's not the probes, because probes don't do that.
Yeah, I'm thinking a vibration or a change in flight control position. I don't know how the wires are routed behind the instrument panel. And you said it just came out of condition inspection, so people were rooting around in there.
That's right. And it happened after the last condition inspection.
Right.
So,
How long after the last condition inspection?
Oh, very quick, probably within a month, actually.
At least it's consistent, right?
Yeah, and you can duplicate this every time, which that's really handy. That makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot and confirm that you fixed it.
But he can't duplicate it on the ground, which makes it
That's right.
hard.
It's a bit of a pain. Yeah, I'm totally with Mike. I don't think you have a probe. The chances of both probes, well, I'm trying to think. Debris can go through the exhaust system and damage a probe, but chances of it getting both sides and chances of it being intermittent in display afterwards. If a probe gets physically damaged, typically
it doesn't
that's
work.
it. Yeah, it just doesn't work. Yeah, I'm thinking you got something else going on besides probes.
So I'm hearing everybody say TIT is important enough to not just use a proxy to until the next time you can get to maintenance. So we're recommending doing something about it sooner rather than later. And I'm hearing people say it probably could be fixed relatively easily because the clues that we have are indicating certain places where we can look. So it sounds like you should probably schedule another visit back to your shop for this.
Right. Sounds like it's just swapping components out until something rears itself as the primary cause.
Yeah, if it's happening in flight, if you grab the right connection or the right spot and move it around, you're probably going to see it on the ground. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the feedback then, and great show. I listen to you regularly.
Sounds like a beautiful airplane.
Yeah.
Very jealous.
Yeah.
Very fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck with that. Electrical problems are the worst.
Yes. Intermittence. Absolutely.
Can't see those electrons. They don't kind of, cause anything visible. You have to kind of infer what's going on. But
Yep.
Yeah,
But hopefully it'll be
what
fixed easily.
Colleen just said is just so typical of A&P mechanics. They prefer working on something they can see rather
I
than
do,
something
I
they
do.
can't see.
a fuel
That's
leak,
true.
I can figure that
Right.
out. Oil
Yeah.
leaks, yes.
I
Electron leaks, no.
I grew up with electrons long before I ever had anything to do with airplanes. So I actually prefer problems with electrons.
I don't like being shocked either. So can't
Yeah.
see them and they hurt me. Don't like that. Well,
All right.
good luck,
Thanks.
Andy. I hope
Yep.
it's an easy fix.
All right.
Thanks for calling. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Our next question is from Darrell, who is coming in garbled. Go ahead, Darrell. Good to have you.
Well, thank you. Do you need an explanation? Are you going to
Yeah,
give it
tell
for
us.
me?
Yeah,
Okay.
tell
What's
us.
your-
People
what's your
listening
story?
don't know what's going on.
Okay, thank you. I have a 1946 Ercoupe that has a Valcom 760 comm radio. The radio receives just fine, and it broadcasts just fine below 1200 RPMs. But if you go above 1200 RPMs, it's extremely staticky and no one can read me.
Oh,
Now,
I have.
I've checked the antenna. I've checked the, forgive me, the line to the antenna,
The coax.
the coax. Thank you.
Yep.
I've checked it. I've gone back to the mags and looked to make sure they're wired appropriately. Everything looks good.
Paul knows
Well,
where it is.
Yeah. So
Excellent.
I can see it in his
But
face.
you can't. Yeah. So this is a recurring theme. I hear people, and I get calls from mechanics almost daily about some sort of what's a 210 landing gear problem, and they say, "Yeah, we checked all the switches." Because I'll tell them, "Oh, so and so." Well, we checked the switches. Well, how did you check the switches? I looked at them. Well, I'm sorry, but looking at a switch is not checking a switch or a ground connection, all those things. There's a certain amount of touchy-feely. And I don't know anything about the Valcom 760. And this isn't likely about the radio itself, but it's almost certainly about connections. So you said Ercoupe, and the radio is obviously newer than the Ercoupe. How long has the radio been in the airplane?
I would say it's been in there 15 years, maybe
Oh, yeah.
20. It's
Okay.
been in there a long time. And I might add, and please forgive me for interrupting.
Everybody adds more. You just can't get all the information on the first
But
pass.
this is the key detail.
Yes,
He
it is.
just-
The radio has been sent back to Valcom. They checked it and they
Yeah.
said it's okay.
It's okay.
No,
Yeah.
no,
this
but the
is,
key detail is the problem occurred after he had an AV30, which is a UAvionics digital
Yes. Now,
installed. So
that's when I noticed the problem.
May have been
I've
there
gone back
before.
in the logbooks, and yes, it's been there before.
Ah, okay.
oh, okay.
So
So
here's you've taken the radio out, send it somewhere, and you put it back in the tray. And I
yes,
assume that it secures in the tray nice and tightly, right?
yes,
And did you clean the connections?
yes.
You put some sort of chemical, Stabilant 22 or something like that on the pins?
I just use a electrical connector spray and wiped it off.
Okay. So we'll eliminate that connection. Is there an audio panel in the airplane?
No,
So it just goes straight to the headphones.
yes, unless I run it through an intercom, just a Sigtronics intercom, and I've had that out so that I can check everything. And
Right. So you're
yes,
operating directly and you're using a headset.
yes,
And how many I'm asking too many questions. I'm sorry. How many mic jacks are in the airplane? Do you have two headsets? So that's two mic
place,
jacks.
yeah.
And then do you have a center mic jack or
have-
hand mic?
one mic jack.
Oh,
Oh. Okay,
And
that makes it easy.
again, I run it to a Sigtronics, and then from there run it to a co-pilot, so to speak.
okay. And so regardless of who transmits, it's got the noise in it. So
No, it only transmits for the pilot.
well, you have the key switch on the pilot side,
Right, correct.
but the
Correct.
co-pilot can't transmit or can't speak at all.
I've never tried.
Okay. Well, so there's a couple of things. You've got the key switch on the control yoke, and whenever you've got a lot of RPM, you have a lot of vibration, and switches get oxidized. So they like to vibrate. So I would check out your mic key switch if it's vibrating or any of the connections in there. So the key switch, is it mounted on the control column
Yes.
on the yoke? And so there's
Yes.
some sort of connection there. What kind of switch is it? Is it permanently mounted or is it one of
No.
those Velcroed Tektronix things?
Velcro.
Oh, so get rid of that first. Just go get another one, get a new one. Those are
Huh,
notorious for doing that.
Really?
Okay.
Or at least go get another one for troubleshooting. But the other
Okay.
thing would be actually where you plug the mic in. The mic jack, the materials that they're made out of they're not pewter, but it's something maybe a step above pewter, but just barely. And they oxidize really bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
get in there.
they're not gold plated.
They're not gold plated.
So can't you just move the plug in and out to just clean them up?
You can sometimes, but other times you need to get in there with Scotch-Brite and polish it.
Oh, wow.
And remember that the ring that it first goes into is where it grounds, where
Grounds,
that's
yeah.
one of the grounding points. And that it also, on this old of an installation, they probably did not isolate the mic jack from ground. So it may be mounted directly to the metal instrument panel with no insulators. We found out years ago that all the mic and headphone jacks needed to be isolated and their audio shields grounded back at the audio panel. Yours has probably not been done that way. I'm just guessing.
So you're saying run a specific wire back, don't just ground it.
Yeah, or if
To
it
the
is
airframe.
grounded, if it's mounted at the grounding point, then just make sure it has a really good ground. It's not going to make that much difference on this old of an airplane.
Can I ask a silly question?
Sure.
You say that your transmissions are garbled above 1200 RPM.
Yes.
Do you know that just because people have told you that, or have you ever actually listened to what it sounds like at
I've
the receiving end?
I've actually had someone use their telephone and record and play it back. For me.
That's brilliant.
That's good.
So what does the garble sound like? Does it sound like ignition noise? Does it? I mean, you ought to be able to get some information from what the garbling sounds like.
It sounds almost like a popping. So I thought it might be spark plug wires, and I've checked those out, and they're okay. So my next thought
Well,
was
most commonly it's not spark plug wires, but it's the grounding of the P lead,
P leads,
because that's that's the only thing from the ignition system that goes through the firewall and comes into the cockpit where it can radiate and make
He
all
said
sorts of mischief.
he checked that.
Again, I've looked at those and those look good. I've even had an A&P look at those and he thought they looked good too.
Okay, so we'll go back to my original thing about looking.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
and I don't know your mechanic, so I'm not insulting your mechanic.
I
but-
most
understand,
most,
sir.
most of
Yeah.
them don't know anything about electrons.
Yeah,
right?
they don't have a clue. So shielding is an important thing. Just like the shielding on the mic jack, I was talking about grounding everything at the radio itself. And P leads, and
the same
Mike's
way.
exactly right.
They have to be grounded at the mag end, and they can never be grounded at the ignition switch end.
Right. And they emit like 100 to 200 volt pulses. So you've got to have that shield in place and well
That
connected.
tends to be the nastiest signal generator in the aircraft.
Yeah.
So and especially if you said that when you listen to the recording of your transmissions, it sounds like popping. That
Sounds like ignition noise.
And I would never have put popping with garbled.
Yeah.
When I hear garbled, that is not popping.
I've actually had both.
Oh,
So the first that I heard and noticed was a popping sound. And again, it was pop, 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 just with my transmission. And now I don't hear that now. It just is garbage now. So I almost have two different sound issues going on.
This business about garbled is interesting because the word garbled to me means unintelligible, but to Paul it clearly means something different.
Right, because in my avionics days, whenever somebody would come in and say it sounds garbled, it would be unintelligible, but it would be unintelligible just like somebody's talking with marbles in their mouth.
Yeah.
That's a garbled sound. When someone says, "Oh, you just sound garbled," but if it's a popping sound, people don't come in typically and say garbled. They come in and say there's popping sound.
where there's interference or something.
Yeah, it's a definite description.
It's interesting about
Yeah.
how different people. I had this is slightly off topic, but I had an interesting conversation recently with an attorney, and I made some comment about no, we only had a verbal agreement, and he said all agreements are verbal. Verbal simply means it's in words. You mean you had an oral agreement,
Oh God.
Oh, okay. He sounds like an attorney.
And he was
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, I need to go get my Black's Law dictionary and see if I can figure out what garbled actually means.
Well, I want to repeat that originally what I heard was a popping sound. Now I don't hear that now. It is just,
Well,
I guess, interference. It just is unintelligible.
maybe one of the garbled things are so bad that it's covering up the popping sound. It's still there. You just can't hear it.
But the fact that it's
Maybe I need to take the marbles out of my
I
mouth.
was,
There you
I was
go.
going to say is the solution to garbling is always to remove the marbles from your mouth. Right.
the fact that it's getting progressively worse sounds like it could be corrosion or some kind of
Yeah.
bad connection that's just progressively getting.
The fact that it's getting progressively worse should make it easier to troubleshoot.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a small airplane. There's
Yeah.
not a lot to look for.
There's not a lot. There's not a lot to look for. The wires are short.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
those stupid electrons again. We're
Yeah.
looking.
Go to
The
the
wires
mic
are
jack.
not only short, they're old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Hey, you know what he has to do? He has to degauss his airframe.
Gals. I don't think Ercoupe has any steel parts. Does it?
No, it's
maybe it does.
aluminum.
It's aluminium
Mhm.
with no rudder pedals.
No, mine has them.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so
Now, how
don't
effective
get it
they
in a
are
spin.
is another
It,
story.
it
Yeah.
can't be
Little
it can't
tiny
be a
things.
real Ercoupe if it has rudder pedals.
Well, it's it's one of those wannabes.
It's an improvement.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, go check your connections, check your shield grounds, and don't just look at them. Do some
wiggle,
some
Take them
testing.
apart.
Get-
Yeah.
get
Take
an
them
ohmmeter.
apart. Yeah,
Use a
get an
multimeter.
ohmmeter. Yep,
Mhm.
yep. Got to know how to do that, and you may have to get an avionics person involved not a mechanic.
I agree.
Yeah.
You've been very helpful. Thank you all.
I think you should take it to Paul's shop.
That's your answer to like half of these, Mike. I don't have space.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
a small
yeah.
airplane. Come on.
Come
It's
on,
a small
Paul. What's your hourly rate?
bazillions.
You
I'm
can work
sorry.
on it out in the ramp, on the ramp. You didn't
Out
have to
on
be
the
in
ramp.
the hangar. Yeah.
Thanks.
Again, thank you all.
You're welcome.
Yep.
That's a good question.
Enjoyed the question. Thank
You're
you.
not the only one with this problem.
That's true. I'm sure.
I
Take the
feel
marbles
for
out.
everyone.
Yeah.
Take the marbles.
Spit out the marbles. It'll be
I
fun.
love it.
Good luck.
Okay, thank
See
you
you,
all.
Daryl. All right.
Bye-bye,
All
Daryl.
right.
Our next question is from Chase, who is trying to help solve the mechanic shortage single-handedly. Go ahead,
right.
Chase.
All right.
Hey, Colleen, I don't know that I can give myself that credit, but Mike, Paul, great to meet you guys as well. So here's my question. I have a full-time job that's not in aviation. I am a part-time CFI, pretty active in San Diego. I own two vintage airplanes, a 41 Taylorcraft and a 59 Piper Pacer. And I just started, Colleen, very part-time A&P school at Miramar. I want to get my A&P, but I realize that I have very, very little time to do it. I do a ton of my own work, all the preventive stuff, anything that I can find in an A&PIA to supervise me in. I'm doing my own owner-assisted annual right now on my Pacer. I'm starting a project on another Pacer. But this is going to take a while to do it this route. And Mike, I think you did it this route. My question is really, if I'm going to log all of my time, what do I need to log toward my eventual sitting for the A&P? What sorts of data fields should I capture? What sort of information? That's kind of my first question. And then really the second question is this possible? Can I actually, realizing it would take a real long time, is it possible to get your A&P simply by working on your own airplanes for a really long period of time?
I did it,
Wow.
so it must be possible.
Yeah. And I've got several friends who've done that. Absolutely.
But I think in Mike's case, he had a real mentor that was willing to work with him on that. Right?
Well, I had several mentors. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't researched this recently, but I don't think that there's any really detailed guidance in the 8900.1, whatever it is, the Airworthiness Inspector's Handbook, which is now called FSIMS now. It's a giant thing, so it's a little hard to know, but I don't think that there's any very specific guidance there into exactly what sort of substantiation an A&P applicant is required to present. So I suspect that every airworthiness inspector has his own personal preferences in that regard. So I always advise that you call the FSDOS and talk to whoever the airworthiness inspector on duty there and say, look, I'm documenting my experience in preparation for having you sign off the form so that I can take the tests. And I'd like you to give me some guidance as to exactly what you need, what you're looking for. I know back in the day when I did it, I created an Excel spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
And I, from the time I decided I was going to do this, I went back and reconstructed a lot of my time in the past based on logbook entries and stuff. And then I went around and I got as many of the mechanics who had supervised me that I could find to write a short letter saying, I supervise some of his time, and so I know that at least some of what he's telling you is legitimate. And I think I gathered up about 3 letters of recommendation from supervising mechanics. Some of them, weren't reachable anymore. Some of them had just disappeared. Some of them might have passed away for all I know, but I did the best I could. But definitely, all of the preventive maintenance that you do, you aren't. It all counts, but it's not stuff you're supervised. So
Right.
that has to kind of be on the honor system.
Right.
And I think inspectors understand that.
Something-
But go back as far as you can and reconstruct the time that you spent. And like I said, I created an Excel spreadsheet to try to make it look kind of organized. And
You can buy. We've had quite a few guys come through our shop that we've helped get their A&P, and you can buy the A&P logbook, which is basically like a pilot logbook, and record the N number and the date, a description of what you did and how much time you spent doing it. And almost all the inspectors now are going to want to see something like that instead of just, I spent all this time doing this stuff.
Yeah,
and there's
there needs to be a detailed accounting.
Yeah, and there's no time limit. I found that out when.
Yeah.
So the first part of my career was avionics, aircraft electronics.
When you say
And
there's
so-
no time limit, you mean calendar time?
Calendar time in terms of how far back you can go.
Uh-huh.
And so when I was first applied for my A&P, I've been doing avionics work, installation work, which is definitely airframe stuff. And the inspector said, I'm sorry, we can't count that. And I'm like, well, I've got several years of this. And he said, well, no, we can't count that. That's not airframe. And so I made my case. He didn't like it. And I said, well, how far back can I go?
He said
And-
avionics work was not.
That's
Right.
what he said.
Yeah,
yes.
that's what he said. And so this is back in the early 80s. And I said, well, I have other experience. He said, well, that counts. I said, well, how far back can I go? He said, well, there's no time limit. I said, okay.
Birth.
So I started writing up stuff that I was doing when I was 6 and 7 years old, and went through Dad's logbook about the airplanes that were rebuilt, and I'm back in the tail cone bucking rivets, and I recorded all this stuff.
And you're reconstructing this after the fact. 'cause
Oh
it-
yeah, I'm
it's not
reconstructing
something
it
you
after the
log
fact.
contemporaneously.
Oh yeah, and I came
Yeah.
up with years of now by hours, and we kind of count because I used to go out every Saturday almost. I'd ride my bicycle out to the airport and work on the Cardinal or the Tri-Pacer or whatever it is we had. And so I presented that to him. It took me about a month or so to gather that together, and I presented that to him. And he gave me the funniest look and just shook his head and he said, "Okay." So that was.
So when I went to the school and said I wanted to get an A&P license on so I could work on my Cardinal, they kind of laughed at me and said, "Well, we don't just do Cardinals. You have
Right.
you have to learn everything to take the test." So we have, and the one thing that bothers me about people that are logging their experience is they're not logging any experience on turbine engines, landing gear systems. On your Tri-Pacer, probably don't have a landing gear system, cabin atmosphere, building magnetos necessarily, or composites they're teaching now. There's a lot of things that you have to know to pass the test, but it sounds like what I'm hearing is it has to be experience, but it doesn't have to be experience across all the subject matters.
That's
You just
true.
have to log the experience working around airplanes and then touch base and study all the subject matters because you will be asked questions about rotor blades and things like that.
Oh yeah, and helicopter stuff.
Yeah, and helicopter stuff. Yeah.
Incidentally, I don't know if we talked about this, but traditionally one of the best ways to gain experience towards an A&P was to build an airplane.
Yeah.
And in 2019, the FAA added a note to the Airworthiness Inspector's Handbook, which a lot of us thought was crazy. That said that time spent manufacturing an airplane including experimental amateur built airplanes, does not count.
Doesn't count. Yeah.
And that was challenged about 2 years ago by an A&P who wrote a letter to the Office of Chief Counsel saying this does not comport with what the regulation says, because the regulation specifically says constructing an aircraft is applicable experience, but the note says it's not. And the FAA looked at that and said, "You're right. The note is not compliant, does not comport with the regulation, and we're revising the manual. So now, time spent building a amateur built aircraft does count as against as A&P applicable experience."
Well,
So that's a
perfect
good
then.
thing.
I just bought a project pacer that's down to the fuselage, and I'm planning on stretching it and doing an experimental project. So it sounds like I'm doing the right things. I do have a spreadsheet. I went back over the many years to bring that back up to date. And after doing all that, I went, man, I only have 600-700 hours. I thought I'd have thousands.
Yeah.
So
well, I don't think that the time you spend refurbishing that pacer would have been at risk. I think the rationale behind that 2019 policy change, which the FAA has now rescinded, was the notion that until an airplane has an airworthiness certificate, it's not an airplane.
Sure.
And so working on it doesn't count. But I think that was wrongheaded, and the FAA finally agreed that it was wrongheaded. The regulation specifically says constructing as one of the activities that counts towards the experience.
And by the way, you are incredibly young, so this is not going to take very long. You think it is now, but in 2 or 3 years, you look back, it's like, oh gosh, time has flown. I finished the pacer and all that stuff, and now I can get my A&P. So you're in a perfect spot to do this.
And it'll be a great combination with your CFII.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, to react to one of the things Colleen said about the fact that you log experience working on your airplanes, but you haven't logged time dealing with air conditioning systems or turbine engines or all sorts of other stuff, rotorcraft. It's perfectly legitimate, and in fact, I did it myself, to call up the designated mechanic examiner who you plan to use for your practical and say, what are you going to test me on? What do I have to be prepared for? Look, here's my background. I only work on an old small piston aircraft, and that's my experience base. I specifically asked my designated mechanic examiner, are you going to ask me to weld? and we had a little discussion about that, and he said, tell you what, Mike, he says, if you bring in some samples of your welding, I won't make you weld on the spot, So I burned up about 100,000 pounds worth of chromalide tubing until I had a couple of acceptable weld samples, and I brought them in.
One of my guys, this is, 30 years ago, went to the examiner, came back, he passed the all the stuff, and he said, so do you know this guy? And I'm like, well, yeah, I've been around a little bit. And he said, well, he got to the electrical questions, and he said, I'm not even going to ask you these because Paul's going to do all those in your shop, so I'm not even going to bother.
Yeah, the hard part is doing the schooling and getting the experience. The easy part is taking the tests. The written test is just memorization, just like any FAA test. And the practical, if you know your stuff, the guy's going to know very quickly that you're a good candidate, and he's not going to give you a hard time.
And it's not their job to fail you during the oral. I've never done anything on a helicopter and don't plan to, because real helicopter mechanics would just go nuts, like, get him away from this, But their job is to find out if you know the things that you're supposed to know for the planes that you're probably going to work on. they're not going to ask you helicopter questions.
Sure.
They're not going to ask you big turbine engine kind
Sure.
of questions. That's not their job. Now, if you get one of those that's just really a pain, and there's some of them out there, they might try to do that just to make themselves look good, but
They do
not
have-
most of them.
They do have the equivalent of practical test standards, so they have to ask you certain questions
Sure.
in certain subjects, but they can hammer you on some things. Like they'll definitely want to make sure that you can read an AD.
Oh,
or,
yeah.
You know, or fill out a 337. You can expect that, but you know, they handed me a blade from a turbine and asked me, you know, one question about it, or they handed me a piece of metal and said, what kind of corrosion is this? And it's like, okay, she knows that, move on. So
Sure.
it's pretty standard stuff.
Yeah, you'll do fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Don't overthink it. I think that's our theme today.
Yeah, get a good night's sleep before. It's an
That's
all-day
right. Yeah.
affair.
It is.
But maybe I'll see you around school because some
Yeah.
of the classes you can pick and choose. They're wonderful classes.
Yeah.
My husband and I both enjoyed going through college at Miramar. It was just so much fun.
Take
Awesome.
the electrical classes. I hear the instructor is really sharp.
I plan
He
to.
uses polysyllabic words. That's right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll just tell you, one of the things I'm working on right now on the Pacer is putting in a brand new engine monitor because of the three of you. So
Wow.
folks are making fun of me for putting that into
In
a
a
vintage
Pacer,
airplane,
yeah.
but
No.
I'm really excited. So thank you.
You just turn your nose up at them and say, "You guys you just don't know."
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks for calling in, Chase.
Yeah. Thanks, Chase.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Our next question is from Andrea, who's wondering if her 0300 is lacking some get up and go. Hi, Andrea. Good to see you.
Thank you
Welcome.
for having me.
Yeah.
So explain your question.
Yeah. Let us know what's going on.
I've had now this airplane for a couple years, and the challenges, there's a couple challenges. The first one is that on static on takeoff, I get maximum RPMs of 2100 RPM, and that spooks a lot of people. When you fly by
Including
yourself,
you, I take it.
it doesn't bother me. No, got a long enough runway. And so I talked to my IA, and he said, "Oh, that's typical for 0300s." And when I climb, yesterday I actually did fly, and it got a 2200 RPM on climb. And finally, when I leveled off and gave it full throttle, just wanted to have that done before I came talk with you guys, I got actually 2400 RPM, which I thought, well, that's pretty reasonable. So really on static display, it's not. So at first I thought that might be a cruise prop, and I looked at it and it's not. So I checked that one off. And so that makes me kind of concerned. I did let a school borrow it for a week called Women Gift Girls in Flight Training, and one of the ladies actually aborted because she didn't have enough RPM, and that's always dangerous because if they abort the wrong way, it can go in the ditch too, right? So anyways, I decided I better see if I can find some help, and so far I have not found any help on that. And the second question is about oil temperatures. Again, yesterday was about 2500 density altitude. Had some good tailwind on the going, but on the way up it wasn't bad, but on the way back I did get to look at red, and so I usually then at that point add full mixture to kind of cool it off a little bit. So those are my two big questions of today.
So this is, I assume this is on a 172?
Yeah, it's a 172G model. It's an 0300.
And have you looked or has someone looked in the service manual to find out what your static RPM should be?
Should be, yeah.
There's a minimum, right?
Yeah, there's a minimum, and you also have to offset it for density altitude. And you can find out if the engine is actually doing what it's supposed to do. That's where I would start. Because static RPM with a fixed pitch prop is never going to be great. 2100 does sound a little low to me, but I'm not an 0300 guy. I don't see many of those airplanes. And your red line is 2700, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in cruise or in a slight descent at a lower altitude with the throttle full in, you should be getting pretty close to 2700. And if you're not, then I have a couple things. One is, are you looking at a analog tachometer?
Yeah.
Oh, well, so if you get a strobing tachometer and Velcro it to the top of your dash, you'll find out that 2100 is really more like probably 22 or 23.
Okay.
And I would start at those 2 points
Yeah,
before I attacked anything with tools.
I agree totally. That was my very first thought, Paul, when I heard this, was the accuracy of the tachometer.
Yeah.
I mean, what in an engine would cause the engine to be running below full RPM? Could it be the throw of the
She may
of
not
the
be
fixed bed
getting
sheets?
full throttle.
Yeah.
Well, she
so
checked the pitch of the prop.
engine controls though are not
Yeah.
going full
Yeah.
at the control.
Yeah,
You know,
or
you're hitting the
the
you don't
mixture's
have
way
spring
lean
back.
or
Yeah,
something.
check spring back in
Yeah.
the throttle to make sure that you're getting full throttle at the engine.
And full rich mixture. Make sure that's all the way up.
I mean, but
But
to
there's
an
no point in
extreme-
hunting it down until you know
No,
that
until
the
you check the
RPM is accurate.
indication.
Yeah.
Always
And,
suspect the indication first.
Yeah, indication is the number one thing. Absolutely.
The
I mean, I don't
mechanical
wanna-
tacks are notoriously inaccurate. They always seem to read low, and they get worse over time. And
Okay.
Yeah.
to get an optical tack they're very cheap now.
Okay.
And
Yeah. I've got several
you
customers
can
that
check the
have them
calibration with it.
permanently Velcroed on top of their dash. Yeah, the analog gauge is so far off, but they don't want to spend the money to put a digital gauge or an engine monitor in or whatever. So they just Velcro, the tack on that runs off a 9-volt battery. It just works great.
I'll look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So hopefully
digital
that's all
tacks
it
are
is.
not very expensive either. I think we decided Horizon went out of business. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, that was
but
last month or something.
Electronics International makes a digital
Makes a
tack,
good one.
I think.
Yeah.
And they're always absolutely dead nuts accurate. They never drift. So,
But you can even have somebody with a handheld thing standing outside to measure it. I mean, all you need to know is that it is the indication and not the engine, and then
Yeah.
you're good to, so you don't have to get something permanent to put into the airplane. Just
You
have
know,
to-
if she got a strobing tachometer and Velcroed it to the dash, could we call that a digital engine monitor? I think that would, it would.
no, it's an optical engine monitor.
yeah, it's
Oh.
optical.
Ooh,
yeah.
that's even cooler though, isn't
But
it?
it's digital because it shows digits. I mean, that's
Yeah. Oh,
Love it.
yeah. So, and then your other question was oil temperature.
Yeah, I had actually asked that last year, so I put on new silicone baffling and sealed it all up and thought I could kind of keep it down. Now we have about 100 some degrees here in Texas, so that doesn't help. When it is cooler, it doesn't cause a problem, but on climb out and hot temperatures, I can't get very high till it actually hits red line, and red line is at 145. That's what the gauge says. So it doesn't have a oil cooler, which I have not found an STC for, and I definitely would like to get one if I could. That would, I know, would fix a lot of it. So that there is a race car kind of adapter you can put over the oil filter, but I haven't put that on yet because, anyways,
yeah,
looking for
the
that.
heat sink.
Yeah.
Yeah, the heat sink.
Oh, no kidding.
I've never seen one of those, but it just makes perfect sense to me
Yeah.
that could help.
How about
when
spray
you don't
bars? We could,
But-
spray bars.
I'm having a hard time understanding this. You said the high oil temperature red line is 145 degrees.
I think she meant 245.
245. I
245.
apologize.
There you go.
245.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I missed 100 degrees.
we knew what
Okay.
she meant.
Yeah, we knew.
Okay.
We knew.
Yeah, we would
Mike
like
says
to
it's
see.
impossible.
We would like to see it around 200.
Yeah.
The oil temperature is one of the very few things in the airplane that is actually regulated. It has a thermostat.
Well-
So if either the vernotherm is not working correctly,
doesn't-
or you don't have
She
enough.
doesn't have a cooler, so she has no vernotherm, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, no
so,
cooler.
Yeah, I didn't know they made
Oh,
engines
my.
without coolers, so that would be
Yep.
great.
Yeah, the original 0300s didn't have oil coolers, and I
Should
have
have.
yet to
Yeah.
find an STC for it.
Yeah.
Well, the O300 is a dry sump engine, right? It's got an oil tank.
No, it has a
No?
sump.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're thinking of the 200.
Yeah, I thought the 300 was a stretch 200. Guess
No.
not.
Well, the case is kind of that, but
But it's a wet sump engine.
yeah,
It
but no
seems he
cooler.
should be able to add a cooler. I mean, that's not that big deal.
man, Well, it depends on your ports. So you have to have
Oh,
Yeah, where would
A
where
way
do
to
you,
pull
you
it
have to
out and
port
put
it
it back
out
in.
and send it
Yeah.
back in. Now you can do remote oil filters.
It has one.
You have a remote oil filter?
Well, the oil's out of the engine. Just run another hose
Well,
to
it
the
ought-
cooler,
yeah.
right? I mean, it's too bad.
Be careful with that remote oil filter because they have, if the airplane sits for a long period of time, you can unprime your oil pump.
Oh, yeah.
So when you first start out, especially after an oil change, just be sure that you get oil pressure right off the bat. But
Okay.
I think the cooling fins around the oil filter would. I've never done one. I've never
Well, I
put
mean,
one on,
but
so I
the
can't
other
speak to
the
it.
other problem, Paul, is that the oil filter is probably not mounted in an area where there's very much airflow.
Airflow in the back, yeah.
That's
You know, when
probably
you
true.
mount a remote mounting
Yeah,
cooler,
it's on
the
you
firewall.
specifically
So-
baffle it so that you can get lots of airflow through
So
it.
put a
but-
blast tube on it. Maybe, put a tube out from your baffling, and then point it down to the cooler and to
So
the filter.
how much of this can you do without approved data?
Blast tube. I mean, as long as you're
The blast
It's a
tube-
try.
Yeah, so I don't think that the heat sink that you put on the oil filter, that's an approved. I mean, you can buy those places, right? I mean, I've seen them. I've just never dealt with it before from a paperwork sense. I mean, basically, you just slide it on the filter, right, or clamp it onto the filter. I can't imagine that would be
Yeah.
an issue. I would do
No.
that, see what happens, and then if that doesn't help it a lot, see if there's an open hole on the back of your baffling that is just open. There's
Or
probably
blocked,
one
but,
on an airplane, yeah, or one that's been covered up.
Yeah.
And then if you have one that's been covered up, but it's already there, it's intended
little
to go to something.
flange on there.
I would take a little poetic license and put a blast tube on that down to your oil cooler.
A
Or
little,
your
a
oil cooler.
little, a little minor alteration license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, baffling.
A little 1-inch piece of
Yeah.
blast tube can make a
Yeah.
huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
That STC is
Right.
probably not very specific about where you have to mount the filter, right?
No, I don't think so.
But
Maybe
if
you
it's
could
on the
hang it.
back-
Maybe you could hang it down below the cowling in the airflow.
Or
It'll
put a
drag.
yeah, just no. Well, you already have enough headwinds on a 172. A little oil cooler or oil filter hanging out is not going to make much difference.
Well, the good part is the oil pressure stays good. So
That's
that's I keep
Oh.
close eye on.
Yeah. So at 245, what kind of oil pressure do you have?
It stays well within the green, comes down to the little lower part of the green, but it stays in the green. So
Oh, that's right. You don't have numbers.
it's old. Not,
Yeah. Well, the bottom of the green is, I'm guessing, at around 30 psi.
Oh, it's that on a Continental. It's that low, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's a high volume, low pressure system.
Okay.
So, and that green arc is only for in flight. It's only for cruise. When you land with 240-degree oil and you're taxiing at idle, as long as you have some oil pressure, you're okay. 10 psi is probably just fine. So don't worry if you see it drop off like that on the ground. But yeah, so 30 to 60 or so, I think, is probably the green arc. You'll find that in the owner's manual to get specific. But yeah, if you're still in the green, that's at 245 degrees. That's excellent.
Andrea, here's the good news. A high
good
oil
news.
temperature is not bad for the engine. It's bad for the oil. So if you're running at real high oil temperatures and you can't get it down, probably all you'd need to do is change the oil a little bit more often, because
Okay.
it does accelerate the rate at which the oil,
Loses its lubrication.
and that's
properties.
particularly true if it's multi-grade oil, because the viscosity index improvers in multi-grade oil tend to degrade at high temperatures, but it's not going to hurt the engine. It's just
But
Are you
again-
getting oil analysis done?
Look
Oh,
at it.
if she says the answer is no.
We know the answer.
The girl owns 7 airplanes. I mean, that's a lot of oil analysis.
Oh,
yeah.
And she flies the pants off them. So
Okay.
I went to
Yeah.
work in it yesterday just because, it was a little
Yeah.
quicker to get there and back.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you might just do an oil analysis on this one.
Okay.
After whatever your normal run is, 30, 40, 50 hours, whatever you do, and just see if the oil is holding up.
okay.
I think, and they have all sorts of matrix in there that'll tell you that.
I'll do
It'd
that.
be interesting to know.
Okay.
Whenever someone has an oil temperature question, one of the things we always ask is where are you measuring the temperature from? There's a front port, at least in my Lycoming, there's a front port and there's a back port, and one location is hotter than the other.
Yeah, and I don't know
Yeah.
without an
true.
oil cooler, I have.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah,
definitely in just
the
the
normal
standard
place
port.
to measure it is right after the oil cooler, but there is
Yeah.
no oil cooler. So
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so it's probably the lack of an oil cooler is really the issue.
can you add an
Yeah.
oil cooler? Is there an STC
She
to do
says
that?
she
said
says
no.
there's not.
Yeah.
I heard there's something for a float plane, but not without. So I'm.
Ooh,
How could it matter?
yeah. Why would it matter
Yeah,
whether it's a float plane?
That's what I heard. I haven't actually found it though. That's the thing. Is somebody? I heard rumor that there is one for if you're running a 172 as a float package, but I haven't found the STC, and sometimes those are hard to find. And
I assume
it's
you're
a
a member
water.
of
It's a water cooling arrangement.
water cooling. They put it down with the pontoon. So I assume that you're a member of like a 172 owners group.
no,
Oh,
I belong to too many groups. I can't keep track of all of them.
okay.
Sorry, but
Okay.
I can try
Well-
to do that too.
Yeah, they might.
Well, they may have some access to an STC information or some old service bulletin. You'd never know.
Maybe someone will write in and give us a letter that points us in the right direction.
Yeah, you
Ooh.
could put a Lycoming 0320 in this thing, and
Ooh.
Next project.
Yeah, because she needs another project.
and it comes with an oil cooler, right?
She's still trying to get her replica Mustang with the Chevy engine back in the
Oh,
year. so
yeah.
she's
Oh,
got a lot
man.
of stuff.
It
That's
has to
exciting.
cool off first. Then I'll start flying it.
Yeah,
Very cool.
not really, but
Well,
It's hot. Hot stuff.
well, winter is right around the corner, Andrea. So
Thankfully.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the bottom line is we said put the fins on the oil cooler and put in
A
a
blast
blast
tube.
tube to get a lot
Yeah.
of air on it, and then see what happens.
I will do
try
that.
that and
Yeah.
check your tack.
And
And
I'll
check-
also join a 172 group to see if
There you
anybody
go.
can help me.
I think the first thing is to get that digital engine monitor Velcroed to your instrument
Or
panel.
your
Okay.
tack, digital
All right, I
tack.
got
Yeah.
three pieces.
Oh, for
Thanks,
sure.
guys.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right,
Good to see you
thanks.
again.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Andrea.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye bye. Well, that's a wrap on another podcast. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? We always love to hear from our listeners. Please keep sending us your tricky questions to try to stump us. Your questions and comments can be emailed to podcasts@aopa.org.
We'll see ya.
Bye bye, everybody.